My great-grandfather, James Andrews Bradley, was known among the family as an emotional man. Not crazy, not even eccentric. Just a little strange in his own quiet way. The kind of man who wept at weddings and laughed too long at his own jokes. Because of this, nobody thought much of it when we learned he had left instructions for his strongbox to be held in trust, unopened, for 50 years after his death, to be given then to the eldest male in the family. It was the sort of thing people expected of him. One more small eccentricity to fold in with the rest. 50 years later to the day, the box was turned over to me, Arthur James Bradley. Inside I found a signet ring gone dull with age, a blue ribbon from a hog judging contest, still pinned with a rosette of faded cloth, and a handful of other keepsakes that meant nothing to anyone but him. And a letter. The letter was unlike anything I have read before or since. I understand now why he wanted it kept from the world for half a century. Had it gone public in his lifetime, he would have been sent to the asylum without delay, and the family name would have carried the weight of it for years after. I have decided, after a long time thinking it over, to let his account be read. It is possible the whole thing is the writing of a man whose mind had come loose somewhere along the way. It is also possible every word is true, and if it is true, the world deserves to know it, so that it might learn how to protect itself should the thing ever come around again. What follows is his own account, written in his own hand and signed at the bottom in ink gone brown with age. I, James Andrews Bradley, being of sound mind and body, set down here the following as true. The evening of June 6th, 1872, was stormy and wet. The day before had been hot and thick enough that a person could feel the rain coming from a mile off, the kind of heat that sits on a man's chest and won't lift. The evening turned off cold enough that I built a fire in the hearth. Martha had gone to the next town to sit with her sister, who had just come home from the hospital after a serious operation, and I sat alone before the fire with my pipe, missing her, wondering if maybe she was missing me a little too. I must have dozed, because a knocking on the door woke me with a start. We live out in the country and callers are rare, even in fair weather, rarer still on a night like that one. I opened the door and found a young woman standing on the porch. In that half light, with the lamp behind me throwing what glow it could past my shoulder, she looked more beautiful than any woman I had ever laid eyes on. "Pardon me," she said in a low voice with a kind of throaty pull to it. "My horse bolted a ways down the road and threw me from the carriage. Could you point me toward town?" "Come in first," I told her. "You must be soaked clear through." She was not soaked at all, and I noticed that as she stepped into the light of the hallway, her hair was black, glossy, heavy as a horse's mane, and it fell past her shoulders in a way that seemed almost too deliberate for a woman just thrown from a carriage. Her ears showed through it here and there, and where they showed, they came near to a point. Her face was narrow, high in the cheek, with a chin sharp enough to look almost cut rather than grown. She was tall for a woman, and moved with a kind of loose, unhurried grace that made the eye follow her without meaning to. But it was her mouth that held a man's attention past anything else about her. Wide, the lips thin, and red in a shade no natural blood ever ran, the kind of red a man notices and then feels foolish for noticing. I found myself wondering, standing there in my own front hall with my pipe gone cold in my hand, what it would be like to be kissed by a mouth like that. I put the thought down as fast as it rose, being a newly married man and not one inclined to believe Martha would think kindly of it. When we reached the living room, Shep, my collie, who had been sleeping peacefully in front of the fire, woke and set into the worst howling I ever heard out of him, a fear-crazed sound that did not seem to belong to the same dog I had raised from a pup. Shep was a decent farm dog, good at driving cattle, no watchdog to speak of, and never fierce a day in his life, so this was strange behavior from him. I got down on one knee and tried to settle him. "Quiet now, Shep. Is that any way to treat company?" He would not settle. He pushed his belly flat against the floor and cowered back from her, still howling, and I let him out the back door and shut him in before his noise could turn the visit any stranger than it already was. "I am sorry about that," I told her when I came back in. "He has never acted that way with a guest before." I stopped talking there because the look on her face stopped me cold. Her lips had pulled back and down into something closer to hate than a smile. Her nostrils pinched thin, and her eyes, fixed on the spot where Shep had lain, seemed to be throwing off little sparks of blue light. Looking into them for even that 1 second felt like looking down into the bottommost depths of hell, and I could not keep from a strong shudder passing through me. She saw me staring and brought her face back under control at once, smooth as a curtain drawn shut. "I am afraid your dog does not care for me," she said. "If you will just give me those directions, I will trouble you no further." I told her the way to town and offered more than once to hitch up the team and drive her in myself. She would not hear of it, and I did not press her further on a night like that. I walked her to the front door and asked her to wait there while I shut Shep safely in the kitchen, so there would be no more trouble between them. When I came back to let her out, I heard it shut. I hurried my steps, took up the kerosene lamp off the living room table, and opened the front door, meaning to throw some light on the path for her. The porch was empty. The road beyond it was empty too, as far as the lamp would show. I stood in the doorway a long moment, then went back to my chair and my pipe, turning the thing over and finding no way a woman on foot could have gotten out of sight that fast. The rain kept me indoors the whole of the next day, so I set myself to cleaning the house, which had gone sadly neglected in Martha's absence. About the middle of it, I came to a new respect for the work a woman does every day without a word of thanks for it. I spent the afternoon dusting, sweeping, scrubbing, and cursing the luck that had made a temporary bachelor of me. My mind kept drifting back to my caller of the night before, and it struck me odd that I could scarcely call up a single clear feature of her face. All I could hold on to plainly was the shape of her ears and Shep's naked panic when she came near him. What I could recall of her otherwise was only some vague sense of an unnatural sort of beauty, and strange to say, thinking of her now filled me with a plain repugnance, where the night before I had thought her nothing short of lovely. Shep's bark interrupted my thinking. The good bark, joyous and quick, that he saves for only 3 people, Martha, myself, and my good friend and neighbor, Charlie Reddick. Charlie walked in the front door without bothering to knock, and found me standing in the hallway with a broom and dustpan in hand, looking every bit the fool. "Ah, James," he said, grinning. "I credited you with plenty of talents, but I did not know keeping house was among them." Charlie was a sturdy, jovial man, patient and kind by nature. He had been born in a superstition-ridden corner of Central Europe, and some of that old country's beliefs had stayed with him ever since, folded in alongside an otherwise thoroughly solid and practical mind. He was several years my senior and had never married. Farming was his whole life, and he cared little for anything outside of it, save for one indulgence, an aesthetic streak that had made him, of all things, a collector of butterflies. He kept a large and handsome collection, each specimen pinned carefully in its own shallow box, the whole of it sealed under a plate of glass, airtight and clean, and he was rightly proud of what the hobby had given him. I led him into the living room, and we sat and smoked and talked a while. I told him of my visitor the night before, meaning to make light of it, but somewhere in the telling his face went from mild surprise to something a good deal closer to horror, and I found myself cutting the story shorter than I meant to. He sat trance-like a few moments after, muttering the word vampire under his breath, over and over. His manner had me rattled enough that I finally said, more rudely than I meant. "Charlie, what in the world are you talking about?" The dazed look stayed on his face as he answered. "Friend James, you have been visited by the vampire, that creature not of the living, yet undead. In Hungary I knew of many who were visited by such a thing. I know its method of coming." I scoffed at him. "Surely, Charlie, you don't actually believe such a thing exists?" James, he said, "why will you not believe what your own eyes have told you is true? You saw her plainly enough last night, and yet today all you can call to mind is that her features seemed pointed, sharp, nothing more definite than that. That itself is a sign you were looking on something not natural. Last night she seemed beautiful in your presence. Today your own mind rejects her outright. That is the hypnotic hold such a creature keeps over a man. And if that is not proof enough for you, think on poor Shep. A dog is not bound by what you call superstitious nonsense, and Shep is not an animal easily frightened under ordinary circumstances." The part about Shep was, of course, what struck me hardest. But even weighing his behavior against everything else, I still would not take Charlie's theories as plain fact, and told him so. He went on anyway. "You still refuse to believe me? James, the vampire is older than ancient Egypt. It has been found in Asia, in Europe, in the Americas, wherever men have lived and died. Whole volumes have been written on its habits, its existence, and even in our so-called enlightened age, it still demands its share of attention. The only difference now is that too many are inclined to call vampirism a sickness of melancholy, a fear of daylight and a thirst for blood, rather than what it truly is, which is the pawn of the devil himself. It feeds on, yes, lusts after, the blood of the living, and its sole purpose is to further Satan's war against righteousness here on earth. If it tastes of your blood, you become one of its own kind after you die. That is how their ranks are swelled, one soul at a time." This was a longer speech than I had ever heard out of the usually quiet Charlie, and it left me decidedly uneasy. Whether it was his words or the eerie wind that had picked up around the corners of the house, I could not say, but a creeping feeling settled over me all the same. I turned the conversation toward pleasanter ground by suggesting a game of cribbage, and lit the living room lamp against the coming dark. We had scarcely gotten into the first hand when the air split apart with the most chilling howls of pure terror I have ever heard out of Shep, who had been left outside. Charlie and I dropped our cards and ran for it, not stopping to shut the door behind us. We found him cowering in front of the barn, tail tucked between his legs, trying to back away from something neither of us could see, his howling loud enough that it must have woken every neighbor for miles around. When we reached him, there was nothing near him at all, except a large moth circling low over his head, and when it flew off past us toward the house, Shep went quiet at once, though he kept shaking a good while after. "I cannot account for it," I told Charlie. "Shep has never once behaved this way before." "The vampire," Charlie said, and this time I heard the shake in his own voice too. "The moth, the bat, the rat, all of them shapes it can take at will. Friend James, you are in grave peril, not of your life, but of your very soul." "The peril," I said, trying to keep it light, "seems to be Shep's more than mine. I still don't believe in your vampire, whatever he apparently does. Charlie, do me a kindness and keep him at your place a few days. Shep favors you, and I'm afraid if he stays here much longer, something is going to frighten him clean to death." "Or kill him outright, taking the blood from his body," Charlie said. "James, neither you nor the dog is safe. He is in danger because he knows the peril hanging over you. You are in danger because you do not, or will not, believe what you already know in your bones. He comes with me, certainly, and you, my friend, be very, very careful." Charlie left with Shep at his heels. I spent the next couple of hours on the evening chores and a cold supper, turning his words over the whole time. I was not about to be credulous enough to take what he'd said as settled fact. Had it not been for Shep's own behavior, I would have set the whole business aside as the morbid pratings of a superstitious mind and thought no more of it. I was still hunting for some natural explanation when I heard, from somewhere behind me, "Good evening, James Bradley." I whirled around. There, in the half-dark of a corner, stood the woman from the night before. "You?" I said, my voice not quite steady. "What are you doing here? Do you not remember? You invited me in last night. One invitation is all that is ever needed." I let that pass. What I mean is, how did you get into this house? I had risen from my chair, and she came toward me as she answered. "I have many ways of entering and leaving, ways you do not yet understand, ways which you, with my help, might come to share." She smiled at me then, and it was a ghastly thing to see, more snarl than smile, malicious in every line of it. Her teeth were small, very small, and came to needle-sharp points, and her gums showed gory red, brighter even than her lips. It was a picture unspeakably evil to look on, and yet I could not turn my eyes away from it. As she smiled, she came closer, and I swear I could do nothing but back away from her. To step aside or push past her would have been every bit as impossible as flying. My retreat was stopped by the big living room table, which I backed straight into. I put both hands flat on the wood behind me and stood there while she closed the last of the distance between us. "Why do you fear me, James Bradley? Why do you shrink from me so? Come, will you not enter my world of beautiful darkness?" She laid icy hands on my shoulders and leaned in close. Her breath, warm and stickily sweet, filled my nostrils, and a strange lethargy stole over me, a heaviness that left me with no real desire to break free of her. My hands, roving without my knowing it along the table behind me, closed over something I knew at once by feel to be the small Bible Martha always kept lying there. The moment I touched it, strength surged back through me and the lethargy broke clean away. I stepped clear of her and brought the hand holding the Bible up between us. She recoiled as though struck a physical blow. She stood there, breathing hard, grinding her teeth, and at last she grated out, "So, James Bradley, you shun me this time, but there will be other times, never fear. One day you will walk the night the same as me, through all eternity. Before that day comes, you will wish you had not refused me tonight." She turned and pointed to a photograph of Martha on the wall. "That one, I believe, I shall enlist into my ranks first, unless, of course, you have a change of heart by this same hour tomorrow night, when I return. I would far rather she came into my world through you. That would be such a fitting touch, but you are powerless to stand against me, James Bradley. Remember that well, absolutely powerless." She laughed then, the most hideous sound I have ever heard in my life, and turned on me a look so heavy with malevolence that I had to throw an arm up over my eyes against it. When I dared look again, she was gone. I retired shortly after, but I did not rest. My sleep was torn through with nightmares of a kind only her presence and Charlie's equally strange account of her could have brought on. I still did not believe Charlie's story whole, and kept groping after some natural explanation even as I lay there. But of her power to do Martha harm I had no doubt whatsoever, and small wonder my sleep came so thin and broken that night. The next day was a hard one. I found several of my chickens dead out in the barnyard first thing, among them old Gus, the rooster who had made it his personal business to climb the fence and crow me awake every morning at dawn without fail. Losing the birds was bad enough on its own, but finding that every one of them had been drained of blood, not a mark of a fox or a weasel on any of them, made the whole thing worse by a measure I could not put into words. It lent an unearthly cast to everything and left me more aware than ever of the creature behind my troubles. I wondered whether she had a hand in this too. I was still turning the question over that evening when Charlie Reddick showed up again, Shep trotting close behind him. I was glad enough to see him, having a good many questions saved up. I still was not ready to swallow his vampire theories whole, but the last 2 days had made at least an agnostic of me on the subject, if nothing more. When we went inside, Shep flatly refused to follow, and would not go anywhere near the barn either, where we had found him howling the night before. Once we were settled in the living room, I told Charlie everything. By the time I finished, he sat there thoroughly shaken. "This is worse than I feared," he said. "James, since she will surely return tonight, you cannot be here. I will take your place instead." "But Charlie," I protested, "even granting that we are up against something real here, I cannot let you be the one to take that risk in my stead." "I will be well protected," Charlie said. "Far better protected than you would be, because I know what it is we face, and you know it, but will not fully believe it. Tonight she will come as a bat or some other winged thing, flitting window to window hunting for you. But it will not be you she finds. It will be me, in your bed, seeming to sleep. Tell me, James, have you garlic in the house?" "Plenty," I said, managing a smile despite myself. It was the cause of the first real argument Martha and I ever had. I bought a whole bushel of it thinking I was buying onions. But Charlie, why can't I be the one to see this through? Wouldn't I be just as well protected as you? I will answer that question with one of my own. Tell me, what is garlic or wild rose meant to do according to the old legends? Ward off vampires and other evil spirits, if I recall correctly. Exactly so. And do you believe, in all seriousness, that it holds any real power to do that? I do not. In the first place, I don't believe in ghosts, evil spirits, bogleys, warlocks, or any of the rest of it. Exactly, Charlie said, which is precisely why you cannot be trusted to hold to the precautions one must keep. To you, the garlic is only a seasoning for the table, nothing more than a fetish belonging to a superstitious mind. Legend has it that garlic and wild rose only hold their power if the one under their protection carries full faith in them, without any reservation at all. Whether that is true or not, I could not say for certain, but we will take no chances on it either way. You see now why this must be my task, and not yours? I saw the sense in it, though I liked it not a bit, and I liked even less what he had me do next. He set me to helping him smear garlic around every window and door in the house, thick around every casement, a good measure around the fireplace opening, and around a mouse hole we turned up in a corner of the kitchen. Finally, he tied a few sprigs of it around his own neck and declared the whole arrangement satisfactory. "And now, friend James," he said, "you must go spend the night at my place. Under no circumstances are you to come back here before sunrise. Is that understood? Under no circumstances whatever." Having let him direct the whole operation up to that point, I saw no cause to argue the last of it with him. I bid him good night and set off for his farm, Shep close at my heel, a light rain just beginning to fall as I went. My sleep that night, such as it was, got torn apart by the loudest claps of thunder I have ever heard in my life. I looked out the window and saw that the light rain of the evening before had turned into a downpour heavy enough to threaten making a small river of the whole countryside. It was so dark out that I took myself for having woken sometime in the forlorn hours just short of dawn. On checking the alarm clock on Charlie's dresser, which I had forgotten to set the night before, I saw it was already past 6 o'clock, a good hour past sunrise by any reckoning, and yet still black as midnight beyond the glass. I dressed in a hurry and started for my own place, hoping Charlie had come through the night whole and fearing in my gut that he had not. My fear turned out to be for nothing. When I reached the house, Charlie was in my kitchen boiling coffee and frying eggs, looking tired, a shade pale, a little apprehensive around the eyes, but he greeted me cheerfully all the same. "Ah, good morning, James," he said. "You are just in time to join me if I can only get these contrary eggs to come loose from the pan." "Did you grease the pan first?" I asked, forced into a smile despite myself. "Ah, no. I was sure I forgot something. You see, James, I am so taken up with the new addition to my collection this morning that my mind wanders. Come, I will show you." "First tell me about last night," I said. "Did anything happen?" "Happen? You know very well what I mean, Charlie. Did you have company?" "James," he said, sidestepping it neatly, "let us call the matter closed, and I will only say this much, that I very much doubt you will be troubled by unwanted guests any longer. Look at Shep, gamboling about the yard like a pup. Is that not proof enough on its own?" It was true. Shep had come bounding in, tracking mud clean across the floor he had refused so recently to set foot on. "Now come," Charlie said. "Let me show you the piece from my collection." He led me into the living room and showed me the largest moth I have ever seen in my life, with an expression to it that seemed evil, if a moth can be said to carry an expression at all. Instead of the usual pin through the center, this specimen had been fixed with a pointed matchstick driven through it about a quarter of the way down from the head and slightly left of center. As I said, it looked evil, and looking at it too long left an unpleasant feeling low in the stomach. "Beautiful, is it not?" Charlie asked, plainly pleased with himself. "Now come, James. Let us try to choke down this revolting mess I am cooking. After that, we have a task ahead of us. We must clear every trace of garlic from the house before your good wife returns, or she will think we spent the whole of her absence at the hard cider, or that we both lost our minds on the very same night. And take my word for it, James, you will be troubled no more by clandestine visitors, so I would ask that you and I keep this whole matter between ourselves. Just a small secret, wholly our own, eh?" Charlie was right. The events I have set down here took place well over a year past now, and I have had no more such nightly callers since. Everything has settled back into its old quiet, and Martha to this day carries no knowledge at all of what happened. But now I must set down some manner of explanation for these events, and for their sudden end. I have arrived at two. The first is that the woman who caused all this trouble was nothing more than an escaped lunatic, and it was our plain good fortune that she was taken up and confined before she could do real harm to anyone. This would account well enough for Shep's fear of her, since dogs are said to sense the unsound of mind, but it does not explain why he refused the house, even after she was long gone from it. There is a good deal this theory leaves standing unaccounted for, and it satisfies me not at all. The second is that Charlie Reddick was right from the very start, that she was a vampire in truth, that Charlie, once in my bed, left the window beside it open on purpose so the thing could enter, and once it was inside he rose and shut the window himself. The garlic smeared thick around the casement, sealing it fast behind her. Charlie was himself well soaked in the garlic and held full faith in its power, and so it stood firm against him where it never would have held against a doubter like me. When the creature went to leave, the sealed windows and doors held it fast inside, and before Charlie's own eyes it must have changed its shape to that of a moth hunting some small opening that was not there to be found. If that is the truth of it, the struggle in that room must have been a terrible thing to witness. It was still dark past the usual hour of sunrise that morning, so the creature, caught up entirely in its own frenzy to break free, failed to mark that the night had already run its course around it. Legend holds that the vampire's power runs only between sunset and sunrise, and so once the night was truly spent, it must have lost whatever hold it still had and dropped, in whatever shape it wore at that instant, down to the floor of the room. A moth. There, Charlie drove his matchstick through it and set it into his case among the rest of his collection. The stick placed in such a manner as to suggest the position of a man's heart, or of whatever passes for a heart in one of the so-called undead. I do not care for this second theory any better than the first, for to accept it whole means overturning every opinion I have ever held on the subject. It means admitting to a belief in the supernatural outright. It means believing my very soul stood in real jeopardy from that creature, and that Martha stood in just as great a danger, through me, as I did myself. It would mean changing my belief so thoroughly that I fear the transition might be more than my own mind could rightly stand. And yet the plain facts remain exactly where they stand, whether I care for them or not. Shep hated and feared that creature from the very first moment he laid eyes on her, or it, hence the near attack out by the barn that night. My chickens were killed, not one of them eaten, but every last drop of blood drained clean from their bodies. And there was, finally, its uncanny way of manifesting itself in a room I had believed entirely empty, or vanishing again in the space of a blink. As to which of my two theories holds the truth, I cannot say for certain, and I am equally certain that Charlie Reddick, who does know, will carry the answer to his grave without ever telling a soul. That, then, is my great-grandfather's account, told 50 years after his death. He died at peace, and, to all outward appearances, completely sane. It is left now to the reader to decide how much, if any, of his tale deserves to be taken as fact. I will add one final thing. Charlie Reddick, who stayed a bachelor to the very end, passed on not long before his old friend did, and left the greater part of his belongings to my great-grandfather, his magnificent butterfly collection among them. He left instructions that, should the collection ever need destroying, it must be done by fire, and done thoroughly, with nothing left of it behind. That collection sat up in the attic of my great-grandfather's house, the house my wife and I reside in now, for better than 50 years running. Out of plain curiosity, we finally brought it down and looked it over. The collection was a beautiful thing on the whole. Every specimen but one, the large moth described in my grandfather's letter, which looked exactly as ugly and as wrong as he had described it. Unspeakably evil, in a way that seemed to have only deepened with the years. The matchstick still sat exactly in its place, and there hung around that single specimen an air of living hatred and malevolence that nothing else in the case carried in the least. We are not superstitious people, my wife and I, but we thought it best all the same to be on the safe side. We burned the entire collection that same night, every last piece of it down to nothing,